Welcome to the Heart of the Cards, a conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what we're dealt. With your hosts, Dan Green and Eric Stuart.
Welcome back to the Heart of the Cards. I'm joined by my friend and talented voice actor and voiceover director and musician, Eric Stuart.
And I, of course, am joined by my good friend, talented voice actor, director, writer, and amazing artist, Dan Green.
Hey there!
Yes.
So, we have a fun episode today, not that the others haven't been fun in their own ways. But we were just talking about trials, and we did a lot of talking about trials. And in the hero's journey, we're sort of in the, if there's the initiation process, the middle process where you face the adventure, and then you have the resolution at the end, we're still in the middle part, and the trials was the first part of that middle part. But what we got to talk about today is something that is traditionally referred to as meeting with the goddess. And we just wanted to make clear that these are traditional terms. We don't think about gender in the same way these days. So it's the meaning that behind whatever gender assignment that was traditionally given them, that's the heart of what we're getting at. So we'll think of these in more gender neutral terms to our modern standard. But the idea behind the meeting with the goddess, in its most simple understanding, is it's where the hero meets the allies or gets the philosophical understanding or achieves the mastery over their superpowers or whatever it might be, but it's where they really click in with the elements that will help them succeed in their journey.
Oh, I like this one. This is going to be a good one.
You're all about this one.
Yeah, that's true. But I'd like to hear your story first. What do you say?
Okay, that's great. So I'm going to refer back to a time I've told people before about feeling very fortunate to have gone to Rutgers University Mason Gross School of the Arts to get a degree in acting. That's where I met Greg. That's where I met Tony. And that certainly shaped the course of my life, not only personally, but creatively and professionally. But so that's a very formative time in a lot of people's lives. And so I was a horrible, horrible student, not just in high school, but also in college. And I know that I mentioned that I struggled with depression, but I don't know if I mentioned that I was so resistant to the demands of homework, and I was acting out. I was reacting against things that I really needed therapy to help me resolve, because I was essentially self-destructing without actually physically self-destructing. But I was screwing my life up. So I in high school I had to repeat a year, and in college I, at more than one point, nearly got myself kicked out. And Mason Gross School of the Arts at the time, we were in the undergrad, and they had a cut policy. Freshman year, there were 30 of us. Junior year, there were like 7.
Wow.
Yeah. So that I got to participate in that kind of program at all was a big deal, and people would get cut. I shouldn't have taken that for granted. It was very risky what I was doing. What I was doing, though, was I wasn't fulfilling my academic requirements. I took expository writing like 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's just, I find this so ironic, the fact that you're such a fantastic writer now.
That's it. But see, for me, it was about the don't make me do this.
Oh yeah, no, I get it. I get it.
That was a level of it. And but in terms of my core classes for acting, and there was acting and movement and voice, all of those I was doing well in. It was this other, which to me felt like a more arbitrary obligation that I was so resisting. And so there was this conversation I had, and with one of my most influential and helpful and inspiring and amazing acting teachers, Vicki Hart, who is currently teaching, I believe, at NYU. She's the head of their Meisner program. Sanford Meisner is the acting technique that we were all learning at Rutgers at the time. Anyway, so at this point, I have been made aware, essentially, that if I don't get my shit together, I could be expelled. And there really wouldn't be an opportunity for me to get back in, or it would be very hard for me to get back in. And I had previously in my life broken through some of those barriers that, meaning not in a good way, those barriers on the side of the road that'll help keep you from crashing over the cliff, right? I had broken through some of those previously in my adolescence. So, like being held back. I had to repeat, I think it was sophomore year in high school. And so while I wasn't a hellion, I wasn't, part of a gang, and I wasn't, getting into drugs and committing crimes and that sort of a thing. But I was doing things that most people would be very averse to. And for me, I guess it was more acceptable that those negative consequences mostly only applied to me, right? It wasn't in my nature to hurt other people. That's not the form my aggression took.
Right.
And even though it was obviously torturing my mom, but that was part of the point, because I had a lot of issues with her, and I love my mom.
Sure.
And we were on very good terms for most of our lives, but that was a difficult time, and I really made it difficult on her. So anyway, there was for me this real potential of messing everything up, and it is such an unnerving and disturbing place to be when part of you is messing things up for yourself, and there's this other part of you that keeps pulling on you to do those things that are jeopardizing your better future.
As an independent production company, Andromeda greatly benefits from the support of its audience. If you're able to contribute as little as $1 a month, consider going to our Patreon page. Any support you can give means a lot to us creators, and we're excited to bring you more. Visit AndromedaProductions.com and see what's in store. If this is content you enjoy, please like, subscribe, and share on YouTube.
But that was something I struggled with throughout high school, throughout college. And I'm having this conversation with Vicky Hart, who I mentioned before. And it is my expectation that in this conversation, she's going to rip into me, that I'm going to be shamed, that I'm going to be told how arrogant I am for daring to jeopardize my education in this way, how ungrateful I must be to my mom for helping me get this education, and how so many other students would kill to be where I am and have just at least the opportunity that I seem to be throwing away. And all of those would have been completely valid things to say to me, and potentially maybe even helpful things to say to me. In this conversation about the meeting with the goddess, and it just so happens that I'm using an example where this came from a woman, but if we're to understand that this is sometimes applied to that moment in a story where the hero is at their worst point, and it's then that they receive what it is they need to help move them forward. Well, that was the setting I put myself in, for sure. And quite to my surprise, instead of giving me a kick in the pants, pull yourself up, get yourself together, sort of dressing down, which again I completely deserved, instead of shaming me, Vicky Hart spoke to me very simply, very compassionately, and very gently. And she said, "You don't need to be here. You don't need this school to make you an actor. You are an actor. In your guts. You could start getting work tomorrow." And that was such a revelation to me. It took away the onus of having to complete this academic obligation to become what I was trying to be.
Yeah.
It took away all of the associations.
Yeah.
Whatever I was working out through my subconscious with my resentments toward whatever that I threw on to the expectations of school or whatnot. And it took all of that away. And because it came from someone I respected, someone who I knew about all of this, what it is to be an actor, what it is to actually have talent. And then there's not just talent, but you go to school to acquire skills to make the most of your talent, right? Nobody can teach talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, unfortunately,
Yeah.
if there were talent
Let me
teachers,
know if you do find that
I will
person.
hook you up. If I promise I will
Yes,
let
please.
you know. Not that I think you're lacking.
No, but hey, you know.
who wouldn't want more? You know,
they might have some good advice.
Exactly. So that Vicky Hart was able to see this messed up young man, and I was tortured when I came in to talk to her. I wasn't proud of myself. I was hating myself, which was another part of the dynamic. But that she saw through all that, or past all that. And
Well, she also knew who she was speaking to and knew how to speak to you,
I guess that's true.
right?
Yeah.
She knew that, obviously she knew you well enough to know that the way and not to interrupt you, but
Please
just
do.
the way to get that message, which would have been a different way to maybe say it to me. She knew that would push you in the right direction, or at least open your eyes to what you had going on for you. Because you almost wanted the confrontation.
I did. I created a drama.
Yeah, you wanted that, and she realized that that's not going to get through to him. And so,
Well-
to change it up, I thought that's brilliant. But she
Yeah.
was paying attention to, was she also a director?
Yes, she was a very good director.
Yes, so she knew how to speak to each individual actor.
And her husband was also a very good director and playwright. And
Right. Yeah.
And he actually was one person who really enhanced my appreciation of Joseph Campbell's work and the hero's journey and what we're talking about. But yeah, and so I think that's well observed. And what you're pointing out there is almost a tactical choice. Like she could say that this other dressing down thing, or she could take this other approach. And I think that was definitely in play. But I also think what was true was that she believed what she was saying to me.
Mm-hmm.
And she probably has taught many, many actors who she also felt didn't necessarily, quote unquote, need the education to be able to get work in the industry. So I don't think that, I was this shining example of talent excellence.
Well,
But
I
do think that she honestly believed, though, that I had the potential to succeed without necessarily having an education of all the skills that you can bring to bear. And I'm so grateful that I did graduate and that I have my degree. It means a lot to me. It was, one of the most challenging but also most rewarding chapters of my life. And I continue to use a lot of those elements, not only the technical aspects of what the Meisner technique, the acting technique, and also the movement technique, and obviously the vocal technique. A lot of what I'm able to do as a voiceover performer is related to how I was able to understand using the voice when I, and better understand how to use the voice. So all of that education literally paid off in my life, which I realize is more rare than we would like in a lot of examples when people pay for college and then they end up in careers that don't really reflect what they studied. So I'm hugely grateful, and I don't say that critically. It's just it's an unfortunate truth, but I'm so grateful that I'm the opposite example of that. But what she did for me was to clarify that all these battles I was creating within myself and outside myself, these resistances to being defined in a certain way, in the pursuit of a passion I was beginning to understand and a talent I was beginning to apprehend, she took all of that away to reveal to me that the greatest part of that power was already within me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she was obviously an honest, good person who had no other motives but to reveal that to you.
Right.
And that kind of example of really paying attention to someone seeing their potential, and you might not say that you were the shining example of this amazing actor at that time, but she probably wouldn't have said that to you if that wasn't the case.
Well, I
Now,
was
you
way
might
better
not-
than Greg, but that's always been true. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We love Greg.
I mean, it's true, but besides that,
Totally kidding.
just the idea that someone was so just doing something good and not lying to you to get you to stay in school. This was there's something very I think that kind of good energy in the world.
Yeah.
Without feeling, it has
Right.
anything to do with her.
She
It doesn't
had-
have anything
right.
to do with her.
She had nothing to gain
No.
by saying that. It was entirely selfless.
And I love the fact that by spinning it to a different way to approach you worked.
Yeah.
It's really that's great. And I'm glad that you found the use for that education. I'm glad
Yeah, me
that
too.
made sense to you. It doesn't necessarily work that way for everyone.
Sure.
Could you have become a professional and been satisfied with the work you were doing without that? I truly believe you could, if that was.
I could have found a different path. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's great that got you to follow a path that was satisfying. And helped you create who you are. That's great. Good on her.
Yeah. Such an incredible example, and I mean she's influenced so many people, and yeah, she's truly wonderful. And it also just happens that she's one of those people, when you meet her, you just get these extreme maternal vibes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we just spent a while talking about how this isn't gender specific, but there is also something about a maternal vibe,
That is true.
That can be really positive. So, yeah. So, and I will forever remember that conversation and that sense of re-understanding the journey that I was on. I wasn't at that place to become an actor. I was at that place to become the best actor I could be.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. It's interesting that you and I have completely different journeys in life.
Yeah,
but
and we're very different.
Very different.
We're very different people.
But there are a lot of similarities in terms of the acting out and the.
Yeah, because you got into a lot of fights as a kid.
I got into a lot of fights as a kid. And,
well, hey, another thing that's similar between us, we both lost our fathers at 4. Now,
yes.
Maybe your father checked out before he actually left.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, we had a lot of that, a lot of that anger and baggage that we both carried. And of course, we've talked about this where, you can't really relate to someone else's story until you walk a mile in their shoes. But it is interesting to me. I repeated 5th grade. I faked reading. We might have talked about this. I faked reading for a while.
You did tell me. I'm not sure if we talked about it in the show.
But I would be able to remember the pictures in the book to know what the text was on that page.
Wow.
And so I had to repeat 5th grade. But it's interesting to me that your example is in the education world. Mine is not so much one person, but the group of allies.
Mm-hmm. That fits the.
I was lucky enough to go to a school where the support from the teachers and my fellow students was all about finding yourself, finding your creativity, finding the outlet where, experimenting in different are you really, do you love English? Do you love history? Do you love theater? Do you want to build the sets? Do you want to do the lighting? Do you want to be a musician?
There was this information rich environment, and they gave you the authority to define your path.
Yeah, and one of the things that was magical. I mean,
wait. What was that word you just used?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say magical?
One
of the words that
no. But I think that is a sign.
Oh, are we going to check in with our friend?
Tips and tricks.
Let's see what he has to say.
Welcome to Wizardly Words of Wisdom. I am your host, Tips and Tricks, and can I just spill for a moment? My dragon has been putting on a little weight, and I noticed one of the cows went missing, and when I asked him about it, he was like, "What cow? I don't know, what do you mean?" I kindly encouraged him to eat some shrubbery. The castle's surrounded by it, but he said, no, the only scales he's worried about are the ones on his back. Well, I don't know about that, but I do know a thing or two about resolving conflict. First, talk to the person directly. There is nothing better than a face-to-face exchange. Far more nuanced than email, far more timely than carrier pigeon. Second, don't blame the other person or call them names. While it might be gratifying in the moment, you will regret it later. My dragon burned my wardrobe. And thirdly and finally, listen. It is the other most important part of the conversation besides talking. It doesn't matter whether or not you agree with them. They will appreciate that you took the time to hear their point of view. And finally and thirdly, how can I be counted on if I can't count? Perhaps I should invent an arithmetic spell. No matter. I'll give you one more, just because I like you. Agree on a solution. Working together on a corrective course of action may not yield a solution all at once, but it does create a relationship of cooperation. Well, that's all I have for you for now, and I will look forward to the next time I can share with you some wizardly words of wisdom.
Tips and Tricks. I love that guy. Especially because he doesn't know how to count, and we always get a little bit more from him than he intends.
And just like me, he's bad at math.
Which brings us right back to your education, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
So, from definitely an early age, I was told by my parents and everyone that was an influential relative or friends of the family, how creative I was, and I could draw and I could do all this stuff. So for a long time, I felt invincible with a lot of the things that I could do. Right. There were no, my fears were not necessarily that. My fears were making friends and I was a short little kid, and that's kind of redundant, but I was a short kid, and I used humor to make my friends, so that was my thing, but I was not a good student. I was an entertaining student. There were definitely teachers that liked me and felt like they needed to take me under their wing and help me along because
I had
there
many
was
of
something
those.
very There was something very charming about Eric, but he was definitely a pain in the butt in a lot of the classes. But so my allies, my goddess would be my school, St. Anne's, and St. Anne's gave me so much power to find what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. We didn't have numbered grades. It was all written reports, so that you really were only competing against yourself. So you actually got information that would help you. Mm-hmm. Your parents could sit down and say, you need to participate less in class or more in class, or you're not handing in the homework on time, rather than you got a B+. What does that even mean, right? I don't even know what that means. I've never had to deal with that, and I've never had to judge my schoolwork against another student. I mean, it was obvious who was a better student than I was, or who could speak French better, or who was a better science student and understood more American history. Whatever it was obvious, but I never felt competitive that way. Mm-hmm. I never felt like I needed to prove myself to those, that I could keep up with them. I had to prove myself to me, and to my teachers. But all of the teachers that I had, or maybe 90% of the teachers that I had at that school, got to know us. It was such a small school. They got to know us, and I went there from 5th grade to 12th grade. So they got to see us, grow and go through awkward stages and become adults and graduate. And through that journey, so many of these teachers, my goodness, just they paid attention. Mm-hmm. They would say things like, the paper you wrote was so fantastic, and discuss it with you, or the play you wrote, or we saw you act in that thing, and it was like, wow, it's like everybody here is part of one giant family. And I had a conversation with a fellow musician here in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about education. And he was telling me a story of getting in that certain students would get invited to go out for ice cream if they did really well with the teacher, and certain ones, and the other ones were all left behind, or there was this sort of favoritism that went along with this.
Interesting.
And I was like, that is ridiculous. Yeah. And also when I explained my education, they were like, oh my goodness, I wish I'd had that kind of exposure to other things that potentially could have been the things that I wanted to do. And I feel I'm so lucky to have had that opportunity. My mother worked extremely hard. My mother, my stepfather, who put me through that school, it was not cheap to do that. And I definitely abused some of my getting away with murder in terms of handing papers in and not doing great on certain things. But never a threat of being expelled, even though I definitely got in a lot of fights in middle school, which you think that would have increased the possibility of that. But I really look at that time in my life as the most influential and helpful guide to who I am.
Would empowering be another appropriate word?
Yeah, totally. And I've used the example of ego and confidence, and ego is I feel like I'm better than everyone else, and confidence is I feel like what I do I'm good at.
Right.
And I feel the confidence that school gave me, and that environment. I have friends from that school that I've been friends with since 5th grade that are still my dear friends. I could pick up the phone and call them and talk about anything with them. They're like brothers and sisters. And the building was also, all the grades were mixed together. So lower school, middle school, and high school were all in one 12-story building. So it was you ran by them in the stairs running to classes, and you'd have to watch out tripping over the little kids, and then of course when you're in middle school bumping into the bigger ones in the hallway and whatever. It felt like it was all one big unit. And
interesting.
And so I really feel like being in that school and getting the opportunity to really try different things and get the buildup of, I can do anything that I want, or I can try anything that I want, because there are no rules. The rules are, if you want to pursue it, or you want to try it, just go and do it. Right. Don't dabble. Don't wait for the phone to ring. You want to be an artist? Be an artist. You want to be a musician? Be a musician. Here's a little taste of all of that.
Right. And
I really feel like that, to me, if I hadn't had that experience in education and that environment, I don't know where I would be.
Right.
I don't know if I would have had, I don't know. If you ask my mother, she would say that there's no doubt that I would have chosen my own path, since I was that way since I was a little kid. But St. Anne's really helped me have no guide rails, whatever I want to do.
Well, and also, and tell me if I'm hearing this wrong, but it seems like at St. Anne's, they helped you to find your path by encouraging you to do so affirmatively, whereas if you hadn't had an experience like St. Anne's, you might have washed out of whatever, institution of education and ended up somewhere and scrapped together, your life after that, right? And probably still succeeded, but this is clearly a much better version of those scenarios, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting. I almost forgot, because it was not the greatest experience. In 9th grade, my parents wanted me to apply to other high schools as just options. And so I applied to music and art, which was up at 135th Street in Manhattan at that time. And you had to put together a portfolio of music compositions or whatever it was, or art I was an artist. That's what I did. I had a portfolio of my drawings, and I was accepted to go to music and art, which was a big deal. And it was also a New York City public school. So it went by those rules. There were grades. There were deans of different departments. There was structure that Eric had never experienced before. And when I was there for ninth grade,
I like that you use the third person.
yeah, exactly. I mean, not only did I think the thing that made me react first was my substitute art teacher was fired for letting my friend and I draw a comic book instead of the still life for the 30th time in our class.
Oh, my God.
I was very, very upset about that because I'm like, this is creativity. It doesn't matter. I can paint that banana. All right. I don't need to, and that apple. I'd rather draw this cool guy flying through the air, and I'll still use all the colors that you want me to. But also, I remember sitting in math class of all classes, because maybe this is why I rebel so much against math. And our teacher would basically read the page number for what the assignment was. We would do the assignment in class and hand it in at the end of class. And then the next day, he would hand back the graded papers, not explaining what we did wrong.
What?
And this went on for a while.
That's
he was the
teaching.
laziest. He was the laziest math teacher.
That's just grading. That's
so
not teaching.
What I decided to do in my math class was draw. I would just draw. I stopped doing I stopped doing the right.
That unearthed so many memories of me doing a similar thing.
Right. And at one point, he came up to me and he said, "Eric, why aren't you doing the assignments in class?" And I said, "I'd rather not discuss this with you in the classroom. I could talk to you about this afterwards." And he's like, No. I think we're all curious to why you feel like you don't need to do this. And I said, and I think it's in everybody's best interest if we have this conversation after class and not in front of the class. And he's like, no. I said, well, I feel like if I tell you why I'm not doing this, I'm going to get in trouble, and that's not really what I want. And he's like, no, it's fine. You can say whatever you want. And I basically told him that his teaching was garbage with more colorful words, but not too colorful. And he said, okay, I appreciate that. I said, look, you assign these stuff assign these problems in class. We hand them in. I get it back. I don't know what I did wrong, and I don't feel like this is teaching. I feel like you're taking the easy way out. Now, this is of course 15-year-old Eric? So, right? Calling out his teacher, which probably wasn't the best move, but I'm also someone that's always going to speak my mind. So the next day, he handed me a referral to the dean's office.
Oh, what a coinkydink.
And I said, oh, so I guess when you said to me, no matter what I said to you in the classroom, I wouldn't get in trouble, you were lying to me. I'll go to the dean, and I'll tell him exactly what I said and why. And so I go to the dean's office, and just like any other public school, I had to write out on a form what had happened so that there would be a public record.
God.
And I wrote it out verbatim, and I handed it to the one of 5 deans that was in that school. And I remember she looked at me and said, what? And she's like, well, this is going to go on your public record. And I'm like, let it go on my public record. I'm not staying here. This is ridiculous. And so I left that school and went back to St. Anne's starting in 10th grade. But what was so just disappointing about that experience, and I have friends that went to music and art and loved it. I still have some dear friends that I stayed in touch with from that school.
You're not indicting the whole school, right?
No, but it was the idea that you're going to put a school together about creativity and then have it all be about bureaucracy and red tape and math scores and science scores and English scores, and not about the craft. And not be able to have just an honest conversation. It didn't have to be in a public forum, but be able to speak your mind. The amount of times at St. Anne's I was able to have an off-the-record conversation with the teacher to discuss problems I was having or things I wanted to just get off my chest, maybe to get some help. that's what they were there for. This I did not feel that at all in that experience, and so it was also eye-opening that this is what a lot of other people have had to deal with.
Yeah,
and I am so lucky to not have to deal with that.
Right. You could call it for what it was, or at least in terms of how you saw it, and then move on.
Yeah. I mean, how do you give one person an A and another person an A- for painting a still life?
Right.
How do you judge art with a grade?
Right.
I mean, if it's supposed to be realistic, okay. But if it's supposed to be just interpretation, which is what art is supposed to be, why, Picasso did things that don't look like the actual realism,
Oh, for
Am I supposed to give him a less of a grade than someone who's doing, it looks just like it. Looks like you took a photograph. I don't know.
Right. In that particular example, it presumes that everyone's trying to do realism.
Exactly.
Right. So I also observe that with our two stories, there's a similarity where the bureaucracy of education is stripped away for both of us, in a sense, to get more to the essence of what it is you want to become and what you want to do, which is probably the most important lesson you ever have to learn.
And I realize we also have something else in common. Both of our mothers were teachers.
That's true. And in my family, there are many teachers. My father was a professor. My grandfather was a professor. And one of my sisters. I mean, there's so many PhDs in my family. It's a little weird.
And then there's you.
And then there's the one who's not that at all. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So I think this is a good place to bring part 1 to a close.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing all of that. I was also thinking that with those requirements of the school that was not St. Anne's, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's more educated about the system of education in our country, and I think public schools are required to do certain things to get money from the government and in order to actually be a school, which made me think we don't talk about it much anymore, but there used to be much more funding for the arts in this nation, in the United States. And I wonder how much negative impact it's had on the development of our youth and in our process of not just traditional education thought of in the most simplistic forms, but the broader sense of education in terms of enriching your understanding of life and the questions of who you are and what you want to do, and not just exactly how to do. Not that we hate math. I love many mathematicians. One of my sisters married one. He's a great guy. But but that was his passion. That was his choice. That was his acumen. So maybe that's a whole other consideration.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you bring up. As someone who has two creative daughters, who went to public school here in Tennessee, that was the focus. It was the test scores for money, and it was frustrating. I mean, my mother, being the chairman of the dance department at a university, had to fight for so long to get that to be considered not part of the phys ed department. You laugh at that, but truly, I remember going to my mother's office and everyone else was a gym teacher, and then my mother, the dance professor. But I get it. I understand, because you got to have something as the way to gauge whether there's an education going on.
Their form includes only so many boxes. Dancing is not on the the form.
Right. But also, like with this whole thing about test scores and funding, and as you said, this is something that I'm sure a lot of people know a little bit more than we do. But I will say that it doesn't mean you needed to become the dancer or the actor or the painter or the writer. But if you wanted to become an accountant, I bet you'd be a lot more fulfilled in life if during high school you got to work on a play, if that's something you wanted to try.
Hell yeah.
I mean,
a lot of the people, I teach voiceover stuff, and a lot of the people I teach with chose more conventional paths, and they're exploring that because maybe some of that was missing, and who knows whether they're going to have a career in it, but they want that experience for themselves.
Well, yeah, there's enjoyment in that. Well, just because you don't have to pick that to be your profession.
No,
to enjoy it. I just think we should be exposed to it so that we can, and yeah, that's an issue with a lot of the public schools, is that they do not treat the arts as something that is as important as the other stuff, and hopefully that will shift a little bit.
Yeah.
I hope so, because I really feel like, especially when we make these appearances at the conventions and we see the amount of creative minds out there.
Oh my God, it's inspiring.
It's like, come on. I mean, the artwork, the writing, all of that. I want to see that promoted.
So many people are so generous to tell us how much we inspire them, but I don't think they understand it's really the other way around for us.
Yeah. I mean, I shared a drawing that someone had done from the last event that I attended, and I was so blown away.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It was.
And probably one of the 5 people that gave me something where I said, "Do you do this professionally?" And they're like, "Oh no, I've never really thought." And it's like, well, this is great. Like, you could if you wanted. I'm not telling you to quit your day job, but you could if you wanted. This is great.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let's bring part 1 of Meeting with the Goddess to a close, and we'll do part 2 next week. And I'll extract another little thing from what we were just talking about. I think exercising your creativity is just as beneficial as any physical form of exercise. When you do it, it is its own reward. And with that, I will say till next time, Eric,
Dan,
and thanks to everyone else who's joined us in this conversation about creativity, inspiration, and dealing with what you're dealt.
Thanks for listening to The Heart of the Cards with Dan Green and Eric Stuart. We hope this conversation in some way spoke to you. Whatever your journey, we look forward to crossing paths again in the next episode. This is Veronica Taylor, and on behalf of Andromeda Productions, we wish you well.
Andromeda, always a sound choice.